Hi, I'm Sheila. Welcome to my channel, Quilts, Patterns, and Crafts, where I do lots of crafts but focus mainly on quilts and quilt patterns. Today, we're going to answer a question from the comments about resizing PDF patterns. I've done a video on this before, but it wasn't very thorough, so this is where I'm going to hit all the details. In this video, we're going to start with this 4-inch finished heart pattern, which will look like this. And we're going to size it down to a 3-inch pattern, or a 3-inch heart, a 6-inch heart, and an enormous 12-inch heart, which I can't even get all on the screen. To do this, you really need to start at the print process. So if you'll join me at the laptop, we'll get started. Welcome to my laptop. I already have the pattern open here with Adobe Reader. It defaults with this large toolbar open, so I'm going to close that first. And the next thing we want to do is open the print dialog. There's two ways to do that. You either want to use the main menu or the icon here at the top right. So for the main menu, you would just open it up and select print. For the icon, you just select the icon. And this is the print dialog. Now, I've changed a lot of things on here, so let me set it up to what the defaults would be. I'm not sure if it's fit or shrink oversized pages for the defaults, but this is what the print dialog should open up as. In this case, I have my default printer up, so let's start with just an orientation of the print dialog and what your settings would be if you're just going to print the pattern in its intended form as the author wrote it. Okay, so you would have your printer selected. Now in my case, I've got a laser printer. I do not recommend using a laser printer because the toner is heat reactive and you're going to be ironing your pages on your foundation paper piece patterns. So if a laser printer is all that you have, choose the Save Ink Toner option so that it won't use as much toner and you won't have as much possible bleed on your ironing. So there's a little tip from me. If you have an inkjet printer to print your foundation paper piece patterns, that is preferable. All right, other than that, you would select the number of copies that you would want to print. In the pages to print option, I have all selected because this particular file is only one page, but if you have a pattern that has multiple pages, make sure that you select the appropriate pages to print if you don't want to print the whole thing. The next thing is size. So it's not highlighted, but size is what's defaulted here, and it's either fit or shrink oversized pages. You don't want either one of those settings to print your patterns. You want to select actual size. That way, any margin differences will not affect the way that the pattern prints. You could also select custom size at 100%, and that will also give you a correctly sized pattern. If you have a pattern that has a scale option here, that will help you to verify that you have it at the correct size, but I'm going to go back and select fit. You can also see at the top of this scale window that fit is going to shrink it so it's 96% of its original size. So a lot of people have problems there printing their patterns. They just print it and it's not at 100% scale. So make sure you're either on actual size or custom size. The next thing that defaults on is print on both sides of paper. Deselect that. You don't want to do that. And orientation is whatever it's going to be. It's fine if you're printing it as the author printed it, whatever it defaults to be. Okay, so from here you would just print the pattern. Now let's talk about resizing. We're going to start by resizing our pattern down. So for this exercise, this video, we're going to turn this 4-inch finished simple heart pattern into a 3-inch finished pattern, a 6-inch finished pattern, and a 12-inch finished pattern. So here's some changes we want to make. I recommend that you switch to PDF from the start before you start changing the sizes, because when you hit enter, which you kind of automatically do when making some of these changes, it will send it to the printer, and if you're not ready, you're going to waste a lot of paper. So my recommendation is to start by setting the printer to PDF. The next thing you want to do is select the number of copies again. If you're using a laser printer, select Save Ink Toner to minimize the amount of melting toner on the pages to print. Select the pages that you want to print. This is to all because, as I said, this is a single page pattern. In the size section, you want to change to custom scale, and then you want to put in the percentage as appropriate for the size pattern that you want to make. So on this sample pattern, I have the sizes at the bottom. I know you can't see it there, but I put it on the bottom so you wouldn't have to do the math. But here's the formula. Take the size, finish size block that you want, divide it by the size of the block that you have, and then multiply that number by 100. So in this case, the size block that we want is 3 inches because we're going to make it smaller. We're going to divide that by 4 inches, which is 0.75, and then we're going to multiply that by 100 or 75%. So our custom scale is 75%. Now, for me, it's automatic to hit enter when I type in 75 because it hasn't made any changes yet. You don't want to do that because it will send it to the printer, but if you have it set to PDF, it'll just open up the dialog and you can close it. No harm, no foul, okay? Do not choose the source by PDF page size, okay? The next thing you want to do in this case is you can just reselect portrait, and that will change the dialog on the right hand side so you can see what you're actually going to print. So in this case, because we've made it smaller, you can see the whole pattern, and you'll notice that it is in the top left of the document window, okay? If you want it to be centered, select Auto. Now it is centered in the page. At this point, you're ready to print. So you can either go back to the top to change it to the printer that you want to print on, like I would use my LaserJet printer, right? Or you can leave it on PDF if you're going to, maybe you think you're going to need this again, and save it at 75% or 3 inches. So I'm going to select Print for PDF. It keeps doing this to me. Hold on. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but just bear with me. I still have PDF set here. I still have all. I'm changing it to 75%. I'm going to leave it in portrait, and then I'm going to select print. There we go. So now it's going to open up a dialog for me to save this as a new file. I like to save it to a name that's similar to the original file, but be careful to change the name so that you don't write over your original pattern. So I'm just going to change this to 3 inch, and then we're going to save it. So let's open it and see what that looks like. I'm going to go to Menu, Open, and there's my 3 inch PDF file. And that's what it's going to look like when it prints. Okay, we're off to the races. Let's go back to our original. Now we're going to print this at 6 inches. So I'm going to open up the dialog again. It did change my custom scale back to 100%. Everything else looks like it has remained the same. So the formula again is the size you want divided by the size you have multiplied by 100. And when I say the size, I mean the finished size. I apologize if I'm like baby talking anyone, but I just want to be clear. The finished size is the size of the block inside of the quilt, once it's finished, the part that you're going to see, that's the finished size of your block. The cut size of your block is when you're making the block and you get the whole thing complete and you square it up, preparing it to put into your project, the measurements it's going to have then. So a 4-inch finished block, when it's a square, is going to be 4.5 inches cut. All right. So we're dealing in finished sizes for the formula. So our finished block that we want is 6. The finished block that we have is 4. 6 divided by 4 is 1.5 times 100 is going to be 150%. So our scale is going to be 150%. I'm not going to hit enter. I am going to hit portrait because I want you to see what happens. So in this case, we've made the pattern larger, but because it's putting the entire page of the pattern to the top left of the print, it's cutting off the part that we need. In this case, if the pattern is centered, select Auto and it will center the pattern on the page. So now you have one page and you can print this out at 6 inches. I'm going to leave it at PDF and we're going to take a look at it. So I'm going to select Print. Let's bring this back up here again. And I'm going to name this one 6 inches. Save. All right, let's take a look at that one. Menu, open. Here's our 6-inch block. And that's how that one is going to print. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so what if I want to go even bigger? What if I want to go beyond the limits of the size of my printer paper, which is for America, 8.5 by 11 inches for standard printer paper. So I want to go bigger than this. Let's go back to our original pattern. Let's open up the print dialog. And our settings are the same, except the custom scale is again gone back to 100 and auto has stayed in our orientation. When printing larger than a single sheet of paper, we need to change from size to poster. Now we have a little bit different dialog here. The scale is the tile scale here. Overlap is the amount of extra image you want to repeat in the print so that you can overlap those printed areas and tape them or glue them together to make a seamless pattern. The cut marks are marks on the top and bottom of each page to show you where to cut, and the labels are labeling each page in order, so if you have multiple pages, you know what goes there, what goes where. All right. The tile only large pages is if you're doing multiple pages and you have some large pages and some small pages, it will tile only the large pages, but you do not want to select this for this instance. And there's our orientation. Our scale is showing that it's 100% and it's going to take 2 pages to print it a 4-inch page using the poster mode. Why? Because poster mode assumes that you're trying to use more than one sheet of paper. We're going to make a 12-inch heart. So we're starting with a 4-inch heart. What we want is 12 inches. What we have is 4 inches. So 12 divided by 4 is 3 times 100 is 300. So our scale is going to be 300%. I'm being careful not to hit enter. I'm just going to move over to my overlap. An overlap of 0.005 is very small, like negligible. I prefer an overlap of 0.25, so 1/4 of an inch, but sometimes that's not practical. We're going to go ahead and put 0.25 in and see if it changes our number of pages. So here at the number of pages right now, for a 12-inch block, it's saying it's going to take 15 pages to print this the way it is. Let's change our overlap to 0.25, which is larger, and see if that changes the number of pages. I don't want to hit enter. I'm just going to hit portrait again. Okay, so we're still at 15 pages, even with a 0.25 overlap. So that hasn't changed anything. Sometimes having the cut marks and labels on there will also change the number of pages that you have. If you have it selected, it will sometimes take more pages. So let's deselect them and see if we have any changes. I'm going to select portrait between each change. So I'm going to deselect cut marks, and then I'm going to select portrait. Okay, still 15 pages. I'm going to deselect labels, and now it is down to 12 pages. So that might be something. Oh, hold on. Let's select cut pages again. Yeah. So with no cut marks and no labels, we're down to 12 sheets of paper, which still isn't great. It's not great. You have slivers of your pattern here, and you know, it's not great, but it will work. So if I were to print this, let's say that this is my best case scenario. I'm not going to have any cut marks. I'm not going to have any labels. I am going to have 0.25 inches of overlap. Let's see if I can change that. I'm going to go back to the 005 default, select portrait. Now I'm at 9 pages. So we're decreasing the number of pages that we need here, but there's not really a whole lot more that we can do to lessen our pages if we start with a 4-inch finished block. So this is our best case scenario. Let's go ahead and print that to a PDF. Oh, also, I forgot this, portrait versus landscape. If you have portrait selected, notice how the pages are oriented portrait. If I select landscape, it's not going to change anything in this document viewer, okay, in this document previewer. So I'm going to actually print one in portrait and one in landscape so that you can see the results. So we're going to call this one 12-inch, and I'm going to go 12p for portrait, 12p inch, and we're going to save that. Then I'm going to go back to my dialog. It did not save my scale, so I need to change this back to 300. I'm going to change my overlap back to 0.25. I'm going to leave my cut marks and my labels off and select landscape. Oh, hold on. That made it big again. Let's select landscape. There we go. So I'm going to select landscape. You see that it's still showing portrait-oriented pages, but we're going to print this. And this time we're going to save it as 12L for landscape. There we go. Let's take a look at how those look. So, landscape and portrait. We're going to open both of those. Let's close this All Tools dialog. Sorry that my phone is beeping right now. So this is the 12-inch, 12p portrait version of our pattern. Let's look at these pages. This is 2 pages at a time. So they are indeed oriented portrait, and you have 9 pages. Let's look at the landscape one. So you see that? The pages are still portrait, but they just like rotated your view to landscape. Does that make sense? The pages are actually the same, but the view in Adobe Reader has changed to landscape. All right. If I do that, it looks the same as the portrait. Let's go to page 1 where they will open. So here's 1 and 2 in landscape, but rotated. The same. But there's something else that we can do instead to make more efficient use of this page of our paper. That's what I want to say. Let's go back to our 6-inch print, right? That's taking up most of the page. So if we use this print to make our 12-inch print, we won't have all of that or as much extraneous area included in our adjustment. So we're going to start with the 12-inch print, or sorry, the 6-inch print. Let's open up our dialog. And we're going to make a 12-inch print from that. So we're still in poster mode. What we want is a 12-inch finished block. What we have is a 6-inch finished block. 12 divided by 6 is 2, times 100 is 200. So our scale from this is going to be 200%. We're going to leave our overlap the way it was because we want to compare apples to apples for the other prints. Now we're down to 4 pages, and that's more reasonable. So let's print that. It again, portrait or landscape, doesn't really matter. The pages are going to be oriented like they're portrait, so I'm just going to put it in portrait, and let's print that to a PDF. And we will just call this one 12. Now let's open that up. There's the 12-inch. Now you've got 4 pages to print. Okay, and that's not too bad. Easy math as well. It's twice as big. So that's how I actually printed my pages, and I'm going to go get them off the printer, and then I'll meet you at the other camera so you can see how this is put together. Sorry, before we go to the other computer, I just had to come back, and I was sitting here playing around with it a little more. So the maximum size finished block that you can get on a 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper is about 8 inches because of limitations of the printer. So I left 8 inches off of this demo, but I decided to come back and show you, and here's why. So if we start with a 4-inch finished block and we want to make it 8 inches, the size we want is 8 inches. The size we have is 4 inches. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, times 100 is 200 inches. If we make that auto, it's going to print that in the center of the screen. And you can see that I have my full seam allowance at the top and the bottom, and I have cut off seam allowance on the left and the right. So the reason that we use finished measurements is because the seam allowance is going to grow along with the block itself. So this measurement is greater than 1/4 of an inch from the stitch line to the cut line. We're going to need to go adjust that at the other camera. So that's what we're about to do, is make that adjustment. But we don't know if we actually have 1/4 of an inch here at the left and the right. We should, but we might not. If you're not perfectly centered, if your page is not perfectly centered going through the printer, chances are it's going to be uneven at best. So what I propose you do instead is maximize. If you're going to make, this only matters if you're making a pattern bigger, right? Let me take that back. You're going to make your seam allowances, you're going to adjust them down to 1/4 of an inch. If you make your pattern larger, you're going to adjust them out to 1/4 of an inch if you make your pattern smaller. That's what I'm going to show you at the other computer. But for now, if you make your pattern as big as you can make it, in this case up to 8 inches finished, and you print it to a PDF file, which I've already done, you're going to get a different block. So I already did it, that's why it's there. I'm not going to hit save because I already have it open, so it's just going to give me an error. So let's look at that. So this is what our 8-inch finished pattern looks like. You see that the cut lines on the left and right are actually off the page. But from here, going bigger is going to save you. Let me just do it and show you. I'm going to select print. I'm going to go to poster. We want a 12-inch block. We have an 8-inch block. So it's 12 divided by 8. That's 1.5 times 100 is 150%. So we have 150%, and we still have 4 pages. But remember on the last one, we had to keep these settings with virtually no overlap, no cut marks, and no labels. Now we can have our 0.25 inch overlap, we can have our cut marks, and we can have our labels without increasing the number of pages. So in my opinion, this is a superior print, and I think you'll enjoy it more as well. The only thing is, when I printed this to 4 pages, you see this here where it says the scale is 152 on 4 pages? That is because of the overlap. So it's 152%, but it includes, let's see, the overlap in that number. Okay? So don't let that stress you out. It's going to be fine. Let's print. I'll meet you over at the other camera. Oh, one more thing. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting things. If you made it this far in the video, my gift to you is that you can download the 4-inch pattern for free, and I will put a link down in the description for you to get that. Then you can try this out yourself. All right, meet you at the other camera. Here we are at the other camera. I apologize for the voiceover. My sound quality was just terrible. I think I forgot to turn the mic on. Anyway, these are the printouts that I had as a result. The 12-inch block I did print from the 6-inch block, so I didn't have any overlap. The 3-inch block I printed with it in portrait mode, so that's why it's up in the top left corner. And now that we're working on cutting out this 3-inch block, what I wanted to show you is that you need to measure the finished size, which is inside the seam allowance, to see where your ruler falls in relation to those lines, because when you shrink the blocks or grow the blocks, the lines also shrink or grow with the image. So you'll need to kind of recalibrate where your measurements are going to zero. I hope that made sense. So I measured where 3 inches were on this block, which was still right on the line, and then I measure 1/4 inch from the seams. I bit my tongue. And your cut size is going to be 3.5. So this is the 6-inch block. Again, I measured where 6 inches were. Now I'm measuring 1/4 inch away from the dotted line, wherever my ruler fell for 6 inches within the dotted line. I'm measuring 1/4 inch from there, and you can see that it's right inside the previous cut line. On the 3-inch one, you need to be careful not to accidentally cut it smaller, even though you cut it down to size. Seeing that bold outline inside of the new cut line can be a little confusing. So here's our poster of the 12-inch block. I'm just seeing if it's actually in the middle, if it was 6 inches, and it was a little short. So I decided to use the outside of the dotted lines as my 12-inch measure. And what I did was overlap the 2 pages, set the outside of the dotted line on the 12-inch mark on my ruler, and then I slid the right hand piece of paper out until it was at 0. See that? The outside of the dotted line is at 0 on one side, and the outside of the dotted line at 12 on the other side. And now I'm taping that down. And I'm only taping inside the pattern because I'm going to cut everything else away. So I'm doing the same thing here. I'm setting my 12-inch mark on the outside of the dotted line, and then I'm sliding the right hand page over until it reaches the 0, making sure it's all square, and then I'll tape it up. Now I'm going to do the same thing across the top to bottom. I'm laying the 12-inch mark on the outside of the dotted line, sliding the top of the heart out to 0. So after I use the ruler to kind of weigh things down, I come back in and tape the rest of the pattern inside of the cut lines. And you may be able to see that the seam allowances are much larger than the 12.5-inch finished, 12.5-inch cut block that we should have in the end. Now, because I measured my 12 inches outside of the dotted line, I need to put my 1/4 inch line on the outside of the dotted line as well to resize my seam allowances. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just placing that 1/4 inch line just so it's touching the outside of the dotted lines and drawing my new seam allowance border. The seam allowances as is are about 3/4 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch, something like that. And so much paper wasted. Do consider using freezer paper. I do have a couple videos on me using freezer paper, and it really saves a lot of paper, and you can reuse it. So this is the original 4-inch block, just so I can show you by comparison. And those are all the blocks we made from our original 4-inch block pattern. Let's close this out. So we've completed making all of our blocks. We have this giant 12-inch block, this 6-inch block, and this 3-inch block, which I might make into a postcard. That's what I'm leaning towards. All made from the pattern for this 4-inch block. Ta-da! If you made it all the way through the video and you missed it while I was at the laptop, as a thank you, I would like to offer this pattern to you for free. I'll put a link in the description below where you can download it. If you would like this video, I would really appreciate it. If you would subscribe, it would make my day. I would love to see you again. So until then, have a great one.